squeezed in between two phenomenal shows. We had JJ Zacharyson. He was on Tuesday. And next Tuesday, we have Graham Barfield. Right in between all of that, we have, well, the man himself. He is Scott Barrett joining us tonight. I, of course, am your host with the most time on hands. I am Thomas Tipple. You can find me at El Nostradamus. My fun fact of today is the first time Scott Barrett ever joined us for Full Tilt, he boot and rallied off of a bad burrito and still pulled through the entire show like a champ. Brown. And from there, the friendship was born.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
I remember doing that from a legal clinic.
Well, yeah. I was scheduled to go on. What was it, Monday or last Friday, something like that.
Last Tuesday.
Oh, yeah.
Well, originally Tuesday, and that was my fault. I pushed us off of the Tuesday, and then for work obligations, we rescheduled us onto the Friday, and then you came down with the flag.
I spent 48 straight hours pissing out of my butt. It was the most unpleasant experience, but I felt amazing like 3 hours before the show. Like, that's when
I'm sure they're really
But anyway,
with that start.
Congratulations to Thomas, by the way, full time at FantasyPoints.com. That's incredible. Joining us, stack crew over there.
Hey man, what a team, man! It started out like I said with Scott. That fits the theme. It started out with Scott boot and rallying on a show that I had technical difficulties on even getting in, and then I counted. It's 16 months later. Here we are. Pretty amazing. But of course, with me as always is Jakopb Sanderson. You can find him at Jakopb Sanderson, and then of course there is Devi extraordinaire himself, Lucas Gilbert. That's at L Gilbert FF. Just so everyone knows, this show is going to go off the rails. There's going to be no keeping it on pace. I have no idea where it is about to go. I have a show sheet beside me. I'm going to list the first thing off of it, and then I have no idea where this show is about to go. How long is it going to go? No idea. All I know is that it's going to be a phenomenal time. So sit back, relax, enjoy. I want to start with Stefon Diggs. That's where I want to start because there's a lot of Nico Collins, a lot of Tank Dell, a lot of Stefon Diggs isn't really dust, isn't really, it was just a coach. He gave up. So I want to start. Scott, I want to know your initial thoughts on Stefon Diggs being moved to Houston.
Yeah. So it's a selfish me first player. You can't have that within an organization like the Buffalo Bills who are chasing a Super Bowl. You need a tight, cohesive unit where everyone rallies behind each other, chasing the ultimate goal. You need a Thomas. You need a Thomas Tipple. That's exactly why someone like that joins an organization like the Fantasy Points. Ultimate lunch pail guy, puts in the work, selfless, works his ass off.
Nice.
And that's just not Stefon Diggs. So you can't do. It makes all the sense in the world. What are my thoughts on it? I tweeted this out. I was told by an NFL insider, maybe the second week that Joe Brady was calling plays for the Bills, they told me that he's not well respected within the industry because he doesn't know how to scheme guys open. And I was just like, okay, like I just filed that in my memory banks. And then what happened to Stefon Diggs? The dude just like totally disappeared. Through the first 9 weeks of the season, he had like 9 touchdowns, 900 yards. And then from the final 10 games or whatever, it was all those numbers cut in half or worse. It was really rough. And so DJ Moore, in the one full season that Joe Brady was the offensive coordinator there, lowest reception share by a mile, still pretty good by yards per game, but Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel both outscored him by PPR, which is just like, on what planet should that be allowed to happen? And I was also thinking about Jamar Chase back in the LSU days. I tweet about like contested target rate, and like the cutoff I use is like somewhat arbitrary because there's like all of the worst, Nico Collins, your boy, Jakopb, and then all of the worst, like absolute busts. And then there's Jamar Chase, and then there's like 7 more busts. And so I'm just like, yeah, maybe that's a real thing. Maybe it's just like a Joe Brady thing. It was also, the pass rate over expectation imploded. Maybe there's some juice there. And maybe it was just like an effort thing. Maybe it could be a bunch of different things, but really, I don't have a great read on it, and I haven't dug too deep into it. I think Curtis Samuel is a phenomenal best ball value, and I'm excited to hear how Jakopb would rank the wide receivers and how close it is now in Houston.
Well, first off, I could not agree more on fake sharp Joe Brady. Like, it was driving me crazy over the last part of the season, watching the Bills offense and, being lectured by everyone about how Joe Brady turned it around. If you watch the Bills last season, like, they were clearly outperforming their record for the first half of the season and just had a bunch of ridiculousness befall them where they lose a bunch of close games. They could have fired Ken Dorsey, kept Ken Dorsey, hired an NEOC. Like, they were probably going to regress positively over the second half of the season in their win total. Their offensive efficiency was down pretty much across the board after bringing on Joe Brady. To me, Joe Brady is still more or less living off of an LSU offense that had Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson, which are like 3 of the top 8 picks in dynasty drafts right now. And has been hailed as a genius ever since. So it's just a tough sell for me on Joe. I mean, I think he's fine. Like, I don't think he's like an offensively bad offensive coordinator. I just don't think he's like some sort of genius either. I think he's fine. With Diggs, it's hard, man. Like, I'm loath to ever really be the one buying into a split. Like, I generally prefer to view splits as noise. One thing that was really interesting was looking through the profile that Matt Harmon did on Steph Diggs this week. And, the bulk of it is that he's still posting really strong rates in the short and intermediate areas of the field. His deep numbers fell off a cliff. What was more interesting to me was that he said there's no real way you can spin it, where it was, there's no like cutoff week or the offensive coordinator change where he started being bad or started being worse. Like, he said, it was actually that, no matter how you sliced up his season, his overall success rates looked pretty similar. And it's always scary with wide receivers, though. It tends to be not a slope, right? It tends to be a cliff. So anytime you get a 30-plus-year-old wide receiver where you get a canary in the coal mine, I get scared. I'm especially sketched with Diggs. And I mean, hypocritical say, I literally just bought Stefon Diggs yesterday. I paid Wan'Dale Robinson in the 208 for him. So if anyone's curious what price you'd pay for Stefon Diggs, that's the price I pay for Stefon Diggs. But I am sketched to buy in too much, especially in like best ball formats where I suspect when all the dust settles, him and Nico are going to be pretty similarly priced. And I would expect Dell to be a couple rounds behind them because
interesting.
At this point in time, I think maybe that's wrong. That's just what I'm guessing is going to end up how it's going to end up shaking out. What would sketch me out is if you just look at the base projection on all of them, maybe redraft is a better way of phrasing this than best ball because you get the spike week upside with best ball. But like in redraft, if all 3 are healthy, I would think base projection, they end up all between like 13 to 16 fantasy points per game, where you're probably looking in like the low 20s target shares. And then, that's not really winning anybody a championship. It's helpful. It's fine. If you're looking at how am I getting into this 18 to 20 point per game range, you probably need one of them either to fail or you need one of them to get hurt. And if I'm just looking at this 3 in this room, and I'm just looking at it from that perspective, I'm looking at one guy who's already hurt. I'm looking at one guy who might be washed. And I'm just going to pick the guy who has the most outs, where like any of these guys get separately hurt, Diggs to be washed. Dell could have trouble coming off of this injury. That's, pretty reminiscent of the one that just like torpedoed Tony Pollard's athletic ability. I would rather bet on that. I also think, the most likely scenario for their week 1 alignment to me is Nico plays X, Diggs plays slot in 3 wide receiver sets, Dell plays Z in 3 wide receiver sets, and probably comes off the field in 2 wide receiver sets. So then I look at just the actual season that they had last year, 24.7 targets per route run, absolutely ridiculous 3.1 yards per route run, only behind Tyreek Hill in the entire NFL last year. I tend to think that Nico Collins is quite legit. I think Dell is legit too, but even above that, I don't have any washed risk. So I'll be drafting through it on Nico Collins. I don't know what the price will settle on, but I'm probably just going to be drafting him no matter what, because I think he's an exceptional player. And then we'll see what the price is for the other guys. I doubt I'll draft much Diggs in seasonal formats. I'm price sensitive with Dell, but I'm certainly open to it.
See, I came pretty close with that. When it happened, I tweeted out that the Bills are taking a significant hit to move him, and that it's probably going to hurt all three of them. Like, it's not a slam dunk for any of the wide receivers. It's just a slam dunk maybe for Stroud. Because our own Brett Whitefield said that Stroud is, through the whole process and after, he's very God-fearing in his press conferences and things like that. But all he's heard and gotten is that he does not take any shit from anybody. Like, he stands on business on the field. I don't think Diggs is going to be able to pull that shit personally. Just from what
he's got to earn his contract. He's got to be well behaved. Yeah,
well, that's why I think we might see like a one and done. Like, he's definitely one and done in Houston, in my opinion. But for me, I think I tend to agree with you that I'm going to be more in on Collins, and I just want to stress why. So you had a guy, and we know how the NFL treats these guys. Dell was a long shot, right? Like, he was an outlier coming in. Then he has the blow up games, and then he immediately gets hurt, and they immediately bring in target competition for him. I can see Dell being the rotational wide receiver, like you mentioned. And even though Nico and Dell kind of produce similarly, like if you look at their base statistics, their points per game, expected points per game, pretty much they were the same, except Nico produced higher in a lot of the things that really carry over well. First down per route run, first down per target, first read percentage, right? His yards per route run.
Pushback on that is that Nico had the benefit of a longer stretch with no Dell than Dell ever had with no Nico.
So everything
in the period in which Nico played without Dell, he went completely insane. Like,
everything I just listed was in the first 12 weeks of the season, where they both missed only one game and played together. So when I'm listing that he outdid him in yards per route run, yards per target, et cetera, that was when they played together, and only for the first 12 weeks of the season via the Fantasy Points data suite, because I'm a company man. But I was already ready for you to say that. The thing that hurts Dell even more is that he did get hurt, and Nico didn't flounder. He absolutely alpha dogged all the way through the playoffs, which is better for Nico and even worse for Dell. So even though he was, rookie really good, watching Nico go out in alpha gave him kind of a better audition, if you would, if anything were to happen. And now we have it. So the way I see it is you have two alphas at this point, and then a sophomore coming off injury. That's how I'm looking at it right now. I don't know how that's going to reflect in the value, but fair. That's fair. Okay, that's fair. There's been a ton of pushback on whether or not Diggs is washed or not. So I'm playing the fence here for the people.
I don't know if he's washed. I don't know if he's washed. I just I'll put it this is the way I put it. With Diggs, like, I think it's more likely that, for instance, Cooper Kupp is totally toast than Diggs is totally toast. But if you just told me that Kupp is not completely shot physically and is going to play 14 games next year, I think he's scoring 18 points per game, like, pretty easily. If he's 90% of peak Cooper Kupp and healthy. But I don't know how Diggs gets there without other people also getting injured. So it's the parlay effect. So it's like, to me, if I'm more willing to bet on old hurt guy, like I'm honestly very willing to bet on old hurt guys, because like once you get past that, that's one of the ways to get upside. I'm a little less interested in buying old hurt guys who also need other guys to get hurt to have like massive upside. But I don't know. We'll see where the ADP comes. He has to slide down a lot from where he was in Buffalo for me to be interested.
Yeah, I feel like the lead has been buried here. Jakopb, can you rank for me your projected top 3 offenses, not from a fantasy perspective, but from a real life NFL perspective?
1 Houston, 2 Houston, 3 Houston.
Seriously though, so it's Houston. Who else? Miami.
I don't know. Houston, Miami, and San Francisco probably.
Right. And where do all those offensive play callers come from? Like which tree that has just absolutely taken the league by storm. I think Slowick is like the next, uber genius, Mike McDaniel, and the most buried lead of all time, CJ Stroud. My God. The last time I was on this show, it was like week 4, maybe, or it was Halloween. And I had not thought about Dynasty at all. I do not check my teams at all. That's why I have a manager in all my leagues during the season. I do not think Dynasty even for a second. And you were like, guys, I feel really convicted here that CJ Stroud is a top X quarterback in super. I'm like, what? He had 2 good games. Like, you gonna CJ, and oh my God, was that one of my worst takes of all time? He is going to go absolutely nuclear.
Do you think there's any room for touchdown regression at all, or at least interception, like turnover regression the other way?
Here's the thing. This offense not only can support 3 wide receivers, it was designed to support 3 wide receivers.
Interesting.
Noah Brown made me so much DFS money last year. The guy was
that's
not.
What sketches me out about whether or not Tank Dell and Nico Collins are as good as I think they are. Because I can't, it's hard for me to be like, look at these great Tank Dell numbers, he's legit, without bumping into. That's once the Noah Brown thing hit, that's when I was like, oh, CJ Stroud's literally Peyton Manning. I just need to figure out which one of these guys are Marvin Harrison and which one of these guys are Pierre Garçon and which one of these guys are Blair White. Because anybody is apparently succeeding except for Robert Woods.
It's either that or Slowick is Mike McDaniel on the limitless drug, which, by the way, was how people talked about him at PFF when I worked there. Which there is some concern then that he leaves, but I'm more with you. I think Stroud's just that fucking dude. But yeah, Noah Brown was really only healthy 3 weeks. In those weeks, week 8 led the team in receiving yards. Week 9, 153 receiving yards. Week 10, 172 receiving yards. Then he didn't play for the next 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure he was one of only 4 wide receivers with multiple games with 150 plus receiving yards. And then go on the Fantasy Points data suite and look at Houston's wide receivers and tight ends by route share. What do you see? You see Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Noah Brown, Robert Woods, that's 4 wide receivers, and Dalton Schultz, all between exactly 65 and 69% route share.
Nice.
Very weird. Look at Nico Collins. The dude cleared a 75% route share twice, maybe 3 times, with a ton of injuries to that wide receiver room. And so I love this. Imagine their offense last year, but you replace it with Stefon Diggs, even if he's only 80 to 90% of what he was in the first half of last year, which I'm not so convinced of. Replace Robert Woods with that. Replace Noah Brown with, I don't know, anyone, or just a healthy Noah Brown. And so oh my God, this offense is gonna fuck.
Right. So we've said a lot of things, and before I pass to Lucas for final thoughts on it, before we finally get to prospect wars, I just want to point out why this is even more remarkable. The wide receiver drafted before all those guys between May and August was John Mechie. Mechie was drafted before Dell and Nico Collins last year, and boy, that really didn't work out. So that's what this offense can do to elevate.
Collins ADP wars. I mean,
yes,
it was
Scott Barrett, Mechie.
Weekly tweets about Nico Collins' disrespectful ADP. I wish I was drafting Tank Dell though. I was absolutely not doing that. I had every possible iteration of Stroud, Singletary, Collins, Dalton Schultz stack, usually with Mechie. And I think I drafted Tank Dell 2 times because I was a total moron on that. But you can't win.
Brett, I can't wait to have you on here, buddy. We're whether you want to not respond to me every time I ask or not, I'm going to track you down with my set of skills that I've obtained over a very long career. We're going to get you on this program after the draft. Lucas, everything I think might have been said about Diggs. But you have a final nugget before we head on to prospect wars?
I think it just clearly shows CJ Stroud is the real big winner here. Right now, he's going as your 103. If he ever falls past that, whatever you have to do, trade up in your startup drafts to get him, you should. I'm still kicking myself in one of the Fantasy Points leagues for not trading up 1 pick to get him. And I'm like, Justin Herbert's nice, but he looks way less nice right now than CJ Stroud. He looks about 3 to 4 picks less nice. And man, I kicking myself. And yeah, hopefully
I did a podcast a few weeks ago where one of the 3 people on the podcast had Justin Herbert ranked 26th in Dynasty. So
really, that's
the Harbaugh fear is real.
Well, Harbaugh plus Greg Roman is a nightmare situation. Look, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to take 5 seconds. When we come back, it's what you came for. This is just the appetizer. All right. We're getting into second course. Then we'll get to the meat because we love the meat around here. We're going to really dig in. So sit tight. 5-second break. When we come back, second course. Okay, Jacob, take us away. Take us to where on this show sheet that you have so nicely written out for us that won't matter in 2 minutes.
I don't even have it up. I don't even have the tab up. Scott, who do you want to talk about first? Let's talk about a rookie.
Yeah. We could do anything. We could do a macro view.
I already made Tom mad. That hits under 24 minutes. Yeah, I don't know. First question. Do you think it's a good class? It's like the first question I always ask you.
Oh fuck. Yeah. I don't think so, dude. It's I really don't. But this class is sort of
that. You always say it's a bad class.
No, just last year and this year, and I still feel kind of I was on point. I was like, well, I really like Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, but the good tight end depth if you're in a tight end premium league. But outside of that,
tight end slate, the receiver slate.
So this is the ultimate litmus test year for film versus analytics, because the film guys are like, this is a generationally good and deep wide receiver class, and I'm really not seeing that with the running backs.
That's one of the things I put on the show sheet. I forgot. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I was looking at that, and the wide receivers you mentioned as hits, by the way, was not Jackson Smith and Jigba. It was not Jordan Addison. It was not Quentin Johnston. Certainly not Quentin. It's not Zay Flowers, who I don't want you to
put Quentin Johnston on the analytics community. Okay, like we're not like we'll wear Jackson Smith and Jigba. Mm-hmm. You know, not that I was like really the biggest JSN generational guy, but he looked great. You know, clear wide receiver 1 to me. I still think Addison's good, first of all. But like, don't put Quentin Johnston on the analytics community at large. Like, there were some analytics people who like Quentin. I don't know, like Quentin Johnston. We came on this show. I vigorously campaigned for Zay Flowers over Quentin Johnston. The name of analytics will not be besmirched by Quentin Johnston. I'll not let it happen. Yeah.
I was alone on an island against Jordan Addison. I'm still not quite ready to give that up, although I'm probably wrong. Just looking back at last year, a lot of touchdowns, out alphaed by Hawk when Jefferson went down. He's just like a fine wide receiver too to me. Totally could be wrong. Zay Flowers too. I was a hater. I'm still a hater. Like, fantasy production was great, but no player had a higher percentage of his fantasy points come on screens and busted coverage. I just don't
still get on a screen, Scott. You still get one. You still got one PPR point every screen.
I know, it's awesome. Like, I'm going to buy him for fantasy heading into this year based on that role, but it's like you're not beating cornerbacks because you're really good. Anyway, the wide receivers you mentioned, right? Rashee Rice, who was just primarily just a deep threat, big, Mike Williams plus, then he gets the sort of Zay Flowers screen god role. Jaden Reed, I was like, there's things I like, but a lot of production on slot fades, and that doesn't really translate to the NFL due to the narrower hashes. And then lo and behold, he had the most fantasy points on slot fades of any wide receiver since, Tyreek, like 4 years ago. Tank Dell, I'm like, this guy could be fucking awesome, but he's so tiny. So it probably doesn't hit. And then no, actually he's awesome. He hits so fucking hard. Puka Nacua, I was like, amazing profile, best career yards per route run in the class. Yeah. It's just weird that, he's been a part-time player in every single season of his career.
It's going to cause so many problems for future analytics discourse because like in theory, it's easy to retrofit and be like, the yards per route run was the signal. Everything else was the noise. But then you look at the list of who else goes on day 3 with high yards per route run and all these partial
and a career 50% route share.
Scrub. We're gonna be chasing the Puka Nacua dragon for 5 years. And probably not replicating it. But when weird things happen, there's always a reason why it happens. but like that reason does not necessarily like have predictive merit to it.
Yeah. So this class is sort of breaking my brain. Just like looking back at last year's class after the fact is breaking my brain, where it's like, if Adonai Mitchell and Keon Coleman are superstars, like I'm just going to be a full on like analytics agnostic, where it's just like draft capital is all that matters. Like you could literally draft the same player in round 2 versus round 6, and like the round 6 guys out of the league in a year, the round 2 guys are pro bowler, because apparently that's all that matters, and that's like all that's separating, like the only talent gap that is so narrow that it's just. But I don't think I'm wrong. That's the thing. Like I think I'm right. I think those guys are busts. I think the players I like are gonna smash. So
my new take, it's just like the whole reason why we started doing like production, age-adjusted production analytics is like back in the day, everybody used to mostly draft with draft capital. And so then the question that we were trying to ask was, how can we find a way to beat draft capital? And that project largely succeeded. The problem is somewhere along the way, we like won the war too hard, that everybody now just drafts off of age-adjusted production metrics. And so you're not getting anything, right? Like there used to be a time where like there was an edge to be found being like, oh, look at Justin Jefferson's dominator rating and look at Henry Ruggs' dominator rating. But like now we're going to be in a world where like Xavier Worthy is going to go at like pick 24 and Adonai Mitchell's going to go like pick 26. And I don't know what teams those are, whatever. They're going to be drafted like the same draft capital. And one of them is going to go with the 109 and one of them is going to go with the 204. And so it's like, you're not doing anything by saying I'm taking Worthy and not Mitchell anymore. The market's already done that. So it makes like, it's hard to come to this realization that you're less useful than you used to be. And I don't say you, Scott Barrett, you, the royal you, like all of us. But like, it's made me have to like when I started doing running back stuff, especially like I was very much not like film focused. And now I like care like frankly like, more about the film than the metrics, because like all the metrics are getting baked in so hard that it's like, go back to basic principles. Like what are the questions that we're trying to answer? It's like, how do we beat ADP? And if the ADP is just sort by yards per team pass attempt, then like yards per team pass attempt becomes kind of meaningless. So the question is like, the question on like an Adonai Mitchell is like, I think Adonai Mitchell sucks. Like there's nothing in his profile that's remotely impressive, except that he runs fast when he chooses to try to run. But if he's going to go at the 203, like great. I guess the only thing that I would say that, if I'm trying to apply some sort of analytical edge to this wide receiver class, what I would do is look at, there's 3 wide receivers in this class that are probably going to be drafted round 1 or early round 2. And Brett, look, here's the issue with the other side of the coin when it's like, well, just watch films. You go on Twitter and if you just search right now, AD Mitchell film, like you're going to find 70 different opinions, right? So it's hard. I trust Brett's opinion because like, Brett's done this for a long time. I don't really trust my opinion. So like the idea is like, turn on the film. I can turn on the film, but like, there's plenty of people out there that think Adonai Mitchell rocks on tape or sucks on tape. And, maybe half of them don't know what they're looking for. I'm definitely in that half. Like I'm going to be in the half that doesn't know what they're looking for. So anyway, my point is like, I see 3 dudes that to me analytically are more or less the same dude in that they played 3 years. They both have plus athletic traits. They have roughly been living in the high teens targets per route run range of mediocrity, where you're not producing a lot of fantasy points. And one of them went for 17 touchdowns last year. And so he gets to be drafted at the 109. And then one of them ran a 4.34. So he gets to be drafted at like the 111. But the other one has like one little contested catch stat, right? Which every time like someone fails, they have to assign a reason. Quentin Johnson failed because of contested catches. So we still get to draft Brian Thomas.
Also a third percentile.
Keon Coleman will be drafted like a 208. We hate Keon Coleman. He's toast. He has no chance. I think he sucks too. I just think he has basically the same chance as these other guys. So I'll probably draft him.
He everything about him is just poor man's Johnny Wilson, which I don't, who's like Again, another guy who's
I'm
probably
gonna
not a
draft
thing
so
because
much
of
Johnny
contested
Wilson,
targets.
Actually, I like this profile.
You said one thing though. I just want to circle back on. You were like, now everyone's drafting off of age adjusted production. If there was ever a year to fade that, it would be this year. Like the COVID year really fucked up things badly for the age adjusted production people, I think. And also NIL, which, yeah, you're more incentivized to stay in school. So much for the early declares if you're going to make, $4 million at Georgia.
Well, how many times do we argue stuff like, oh, Chris Olave wasn't an early declare because he went back to school and you got scorned for it. I know I botched that. I picked Sky Moore over Chris Olave because Chris Olave wasn't an early declare. And I stated after that draft class that I'm just not going to look at that anymore the same way, especially when NIL came into play. So if you're not adapting, you're dying. You have to.
What I'm trying to care about more this class is really just trying to focus on. I'm having an easier time making excuses for the guys who produced, even if it was late or even if it was weird or even if it was whatever. Like I just want to know
Xavier
that you can do
Legette?
something. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm leaning into. I think I'm going to be like cautiously optimistic about Legette because at least he's done it, right? There's a lot of guys in this draft class that have never shown any sort of production.
Mm-hmm.
And, would I like him more if he did it earlier? Yeah. Like, would he be drafted higher if he did it earlier? But like, if we're all kind of grouping everybody in this bucket of like non-analytics friendly wide receivers, I would probably rather have the guy who has the season of like the 25% targets per route run in the SEC with plus efficiency. Like that's interesting to me. Is the world still full of this profile? And do most of them suck? Yeah, I think he's probably going to suck too. The fun thing is that like this class just stacks up to the extent that even if you say all these guys are roughly the same, you have to order them somehow. And someone has to end up going at the 301 in your draft. And right now, it seems like Legette is one of these guys who's getting the short shrift.
Well, this started as like a macro view look. And so, what do we have at the wide receiver position? We have 3 studs. And then there's massive red flags with everyone you're going to talk about right after that, except for maybe this year's Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin. But I don't know how much that is as a compliment anymore.
You said it. It's. I have drafted this guy. Hand up. This guy's gonna hit because he's gonna be the first one I don't draft. I promise you. So I liked Troy Franklin more when he was KJ Hamler. I liked him even more when he was named Brown. I liked him even more when he was named Marvin Mims. It's like I was pulling this like the other day, like the archetype of high ADOT, low weight, like plus age adjusted production, but they go on day 2 is both a minefield of sadness and still a small enough sample that I'm not sure I should care about it, but it's definitely a minefield of sadness.
Yeah, absolutely right. But yeah, everyone's saying insanely deep. You're not really seeing that with the analytics. With the tight end position, you have Brock Bowers. We should talk, but that's fun to talk. Bowers is awesome. And then you have a whole bunch of question marks who honestly aren't that great. And then running backs, I think you have 2 good but not great ones, and a guy who's not good but will be great for fantasy because he's going to get drafted by Harbaugh in round 2 and go to the Chargers and smash. And then like a bunch of question marks who kind of suck. And that's it. And like, that's why like these podcasts aren't great for me because it's the bearer of bad news that's not exciting, but that's kind of just like what the numbers are showing to me.
But it's also needed, Scott, because a lot in the Dynasty community, which is one thing since this show started, we have always tried to be as like more level headed. A lot in the Dynasty community, and it's on a lot of us. It's on like 95% of us. We're like, oh, this class rocks. All of a sudden, like 8 months ago, this class was shit and you needed to trade away all your 24 picks. And now we're getting closer to the draft. And everywhere in the Dynasty community, it's, I love this class. This class is dope. I'm happy to have my 109s and 110s. I think there needs to be a little dose of reality, because as much as like Lucas loves his Troy Franklins and like Jacob just laid out, from everyone you're going to draft from like 108 to 204, the chances are you've got a lot of Christian Watsons that ends up being Jahan Dotsons, and you get a lot of guys that you like a lot that just end up being Josh Downs. So you're rolling the dice.
I don't know why we're assaulting Josh Downs right now. That was uncalled for.
Because he's going as wide receiver 49. So it's like,
yeah,
you can be as excited. You can be as excited about him as you want, but he's still limited.
I mean, I think I said this on the last show that we did, but and everybody can take or leave like my ranks. But in terms of like where I think this class is versus relative, like my ranks will always be a little bit kinder to the current class than when you think about it in terms of like the base picks, because the way I do my rankings, for anyone that somehow doesn't know at this point of the show, how I do my rankings is I put everyone into tiers based on their base pick value. And a base pick means it's equally likely to fall anywhere 1 to 12. That's a little bit better than a mid pick, because 1 is better than 6, more than 12 is worse than 7. But I always do it as a year out. So essentially it's like a pick that you can't use this year, this hypothetical exercise. So a draft class is always going to scale a little bit better than that, because you actually get to use them this year. But basically, I have all the way down, like normally I would expect to see like the first few picks are probably 2+ first. That's certainly the case this year. All the way through to 7, I have them ranked as more than a base first in value with the Doomsday. I have McCarthy as my equilibrium point at 8. And then like 9, 10 is late first. I have ranked, and they're ranked as late first. And like the only part in which I think, where I feel, at least in my ranks, where the class is like worse than what you'd expect, is in the 11, 12 range, where like 11 and 12 are late first. I have them ranked as early second, like level players.
Yeah.
But the Cowboys are going to draft one of the running backs, and then no one's going to care about that anymore.
Receivers going to the Bills.
And like I still have guys ranked like mid 2 into like the late 2. I have guys ranked late 2 into the early 3. Like I think it's a D class. Like the only place, again, like all this stuff is only as much of an edge as your league mates let it be. But the only place I don't want to pick, as in where like the name on the draft pick is worth less than the player I'm taking there, for me is like the 111, the 112, maybe even the 19, the 110. I'm not really sold on Thomas and Worthy as much as maybe like my ranking implies, but like I still think it's an exciting class. I'm really excited to make late second and early third round picks. And I mean, I fucking love the first 7 like so much.
Are you talking pre-draft rookie drafts, which is the only way to do it?
I mean, that's my preferred way to do it, but that's like that's not how most of my leagues operate, because
cowards.
It's an imperfect world, Scott.
Right. Well, you're not living one. I think 90% of my leagues are that way. But yeah, we didn't talk about wide quarterbacks either. I think Caleb Williams 101 is a lie, because I've been in 4 or 5 rookie
I think
drafts.
your leagues are not indicative of the general public.
Really? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
definitely could be the case, but I get a hot take I'm trying to test out here. Why isn't Jaden Daniels the consensus QB1?
I think he sucks.
What?
Yeah,
wow.
He has the highest range of Justin Fields in his range of outcomes.
But from someone who loved Justin Fields so much, I thought you would be all in on that, because like, what is his floor? Is he's Justin Fields, who was fucking awesome for 3 years and held value really well, despite being like so bad. And I think this guy's way better than Justin Fields personally.
The Jaden Daniels thing is interesting. I can't wait to get Lucas's take after this, because I'm leading into the Debbie here. It's weird to be against Jaden Daniels now, because like I've been like on Jaden Daniels Island for years. I've been like collecting Jaden Daniels Debbie shares like off the scrap heap. Like I'm walking through my local bodega, and they're like half off apples, 80% off Jaden Daniels. We don't want this guy at all. NFL's going to convert him to wide receiver. And then eventually it was I don't know. It felt like hitting the lottery all of a sudden when seeing he's going to be a top 5 pick. It's incomprehensible to me, because I like watched him play at Arizona State for years. And I just like, it's hard for me to wrap my head around how much he's progressed. And I also don't know that he's still progressed enough. Like, I watched every LSU game last year, because like massive filled with NFL prospects, and Jaden Daniels on all my C2C teams. I still see a guy that has like really good touch thrown outside on the deep ball. I don't know that he has like actually that super strong of an arm, and honestly, I think he underthrew Thomas pretty frequently, but has like really nice speed variation on the deep ball. Obviously, a ridiculous runner. Like clearly, to me, like this the best rushing prospect coming into the NFL since Lamar Jackson. But like the sack issues are a problem, especially considering how dynamic he is. Like if you're that ridiculously elusive, why are you taking so many sacks? The issues in terms of getting to the middle of the field are a problem to me. I don't think that very frequently he is a passer when he's on the move. Like that's the big difference between why I like May so much more than Daniels, because I find more frequently when May is on the move, he's trying to make plays with his arm. I find Daniels goes into runner mode really, really quickly. And then my issue with him from a fantasy upside perspective, it's a small nitpicky one, but Lamar Jackson runs for like twice as many yards as Josh Allen does every year and scores usually less fantasy points on the ground or similar because they don't use him at the goal line. And Jaden Daniels is built like me, and I know what it's like to be 6'4", 200 pounds, which like I don't care what he weighed in at. That's like what he looks like to me. It looks like I'm looking in a mirror. And like that's not a dude who's going to be having a ton of rushing touchdowns. He played as many games in college as Bo Nix. Bo Nix had more rushing touchdowns than Jaden Daniels did, right? So I get a little bit of concerned about that, where he could be between the 20s rusher. And ultimately, if this was last year's class, it would be like how I felt about Anthony Richardson, where like there wasn't anybody else with this ridiculous, insane, game-breaking upside that I felt about, where I would have probably just sucked it up and taken Daniels at the 102. This year on Harrison and Neighbors and arguably Brock Bowers, there's this mix to me of like ridiculously high floor of how good they are, also immense ceiling, and also unavailability by later. Like usually with receivers, I don't mind bypassing my have to in rookie drafts and trying to buy high once they tell me that they're really, really good, because the market seems to be a little slow in adjusting to, oh, this guy's not the wide receiver 15 in Dynasty. He's the wide receiver 3 in Dynasty. But Neighbors and Harrison are priced under the assumption, in my view, I think a correct assumption, that they're going to be top 5 Dynasty wide receivers for a very long time. Which means if I want to get them, like I kind of have to draft them now, or I have to hope that they suck, in which case I probably don't want them. So I just, for me, I look at it as like everybody at the top of this class is an elite ceiling. One of them, I'm concerned about the floor. And maybe I'll be wrong. Like, I don't think I was being provocative intentionally by saying I think he sucks. I just think he has like a risk of sucking. I would be stunned if Neighbors or Harrison sucked. So for me, he's 5, and I'm open to hearing 6. I have him tiered right now with Caleb 1, Harrison, Neighbors, and May, and Daniels and Bowers.
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about my quarterback process. For running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, what I do is I write 50,000 word articles and spend, months writing them. For quarterbacks, what I do is I look at projected draft capital. More importantly, a more predictive variable is I look at what Brett Whitefield says in the Fantasy Points prospect guide. Legitimately like beats draft capital easily. Like his track record is fucking insane. And then after that, I just adjust based on rushing upside, which is so important, such a fantasy cheat code. And it's interesting. We're comparing Gene Daniels to Fields when maybe the comparison is Caleb Williams to Fields. Not Brett Whitefield's QB1. Caleb Williams had trouble playing within the structure of the offense, not a high level processor. 2 things you would say about Justin Fields. I did watch Jaden Daniels with Brett. I thought he looked awesome. I'm really not a film guy, but obviously, he has that rushing component that's closer to it's similar to Fields, Lamar, and RG3, and like no one else. So I don't know. When I was watching him, I just couldn't, like, I don't know. I know Chicago seems like an awesome landing spot, but just that rushing cheat. Don't forget. Oh, that's what I was trying to say. Just don't forget, Justin Fields was not a top 3 pick like Jaden Daniels. He went 11th, and Brett had like a late 1st, early 2nd round grade on Justin Fields, much higher grade on Jaden Daniels. So I don't know. I'm workshopping it. I'm not there yet, but I'm workshopping this.
So the thing that really turned the Devy community off of Justin Fields originally is he had a great freshman season. 2020, they only played, I think, 4 games. 2021, 10 touchdown, 10 interception season. So everybody's like, all right, he's dead. And then he's transferring out to LSU. There was a lot of quarterback competition originally, and he just didn't have the passing volume. So why still get excited about him? And then he wins the Heisman this season, puts out a phenomenal year. So everybody's then once again getting excited about him, but it's to the point that, yes, I'm starting to question what his ceiling's going to be, but I think just based off of his draft capital, he's going to have a good enough floor. You can almost talk him into being this year's Hendon Hooker, but he didn't tear his ACL. And people don't look at the LSU offense as being a gimmicky offense, but they have a lot of very similar profiles in terms of how they were progressing throughout their career after they transferred. And yes, they have command of their college offense. We'll see if that's the same thing moving forward. And he does have a ton of like timing based throws. Now, he completely commands it. Very good on him. But I am starting to get a little bit scared about what his ceiling is. I'm right now have him as my 104. But I can also start falling further down, just like you're saying, Jacob. But I don't think that there's going to be a universe where whenever we're at this same point in time next year that you can't trade him away for a rookie one.
Well,
easily you can. I mean, that's the thing, right? That's the beauty of the Russian quarterback is like you get a free peak, right? Like you almost all like Fields, frankly, even Lance. We don't know it yet, but we could be living in the free peak world of Anthony Richardson's career right now. Like, you always get, but that's also the problem, right? I just mentioned Anthony Richardson. Okay, right now, if you took Anthony Richardson at the 102 in rookie drafts, I mean, I guess it wasn't right because Stroud, but like it's fine. Like on the overall world of things, you've done fine with that pick. He's worth more now than he was then. Let's pretend that Anthony Richardson becomes a massive bust, which I don't really think is going to happen, and I really hope doesn't happen because
Homer.
I would be super sad as a Colts fan. But I'm not really to be trusted with Anthony Richardson takes for that reason.
Or Josh Downs.
It's going to be easy a year from now for everybody to go revisionist history and be like, well, look, Anthony Richardson was successful. You could have got out after year one. Stand up, right? Who's willing to put your hand up right now and say Anthony Richardson's going to bust? Let's get out now. Because if you stand up and say that, then fine. But if we're all kind of hedging, there has to be a point in which you recognize where the train is coming off the tracks before everybody else does. And I have some level of faith in my ability to do that. Like I think that I managed that in my individual leagues, like pretty successfully with Fields. But it's not like a fun game to play. It's not a reliable game to play. And I'm not saying it's an inevitable game to play. Maybe Jaden Daniels is awesome, and he's the 103 in Superflex drafts next year, and everybody's super pumped that they got him at any cost. If the top available option was like Jahmyr Gibbs, and it was Jahmyr Gibbs versus Jaden Daniels, it was like, oh, do I want a 199-pound running back who I think is really good, but like how high is the ceiling as a bell cow, or do I want to bet on this like really ridiculous Russian quarterback and see what happens? I would do the quarterback. But I just think Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harris are going to be first-round startup picks for like the next 8 years. And then I don't have to worry about playing a game of chicken. And then I just want to take them instead. That's just where I'm at with it.
So my thing with the quarterback class is landing spot's going to matter for me real bad. I know Brett is, Caleb Williams is a bust type mentality, which I love you, Brett. I can't wait to talk about that. I disagree. But when it comes to every quarterback after Caleb, where it's May, JJ, Daniels, and who knows, like there are Rattler people out there that think this guy should be in the upper tier with some of these guys. I know you do for sure, but for me, it's landing spot that's going to make my decision for me. Like if you're telling me May or JJ ends up in Minnesota, I'll take them over Daniels in New England.
I really can't get on board with that. Like, yeah, Minnesota is like a sweet spot for sure, but I don't think any of them are touching Jaden Daniels. It's just like, what's the range of outcomes for this guy if he goes second overall, which means like, even if he sucks, he's starting for 2 or 3 seasons. And it's like, all right, let's say he's bad at real football. What's it? He's still probably going to outproduce Caleb Williams or Drake May or JJ, who doesn't have anywhere near as much of a rushing. And then what if he's good at football? Then he
Drake
breaks
May's a really
leagues.
good runner.
Yeah, Caleb can move too. Like and according to Brett Whitefield, so can JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, I don't think it's anywhere near on par as Jaden Daniels, who just
but I think Drake May will run for more touchdowns.
Hear me out.
Caleb will run for more touchdowns.
That could. That's certainly a possibility. I don't know that I see that. And again, like I think this guy's good, like good at real football. Not a huge level of certainty. What I do have huge certainty is like, even if he sucks, he's awesome at fantasy football. And if he's good at real football, he's like breaking leagues.
Yeah. I mean, that's
do you want, if you could pick, do you want Kirk Cousins' career for 12 years or Justin Fields for 3?
Yeah, honestly,
that's not really
so in like a 1 QB league, if you run the math, like it's not obvious
asking.
to me that Kirk Cousins is more valuable
God,
in a super flex for sure. I take in a super, certainly, but Cousins, or you could bail. Like you could certainly have traded Justin Fields for what, a 2nd or 3rd round startup pick like 5 months ago.
Well, here's the counter to it. Like on the thing, it's like we just did a startup draft with you. And
look how high Anthony Richardson went in that.
Yeah, and look, but that's because people are like obsessed with this like idea of age. When like we got Kyler Murray at the 2-3 turn, which like if we're talking about like, oh, what if he runs and if he's like, and I don't really know if Kyler Murray's good. He's certainly not bad. He's like probably average. And like he runs a lot and he doesn't have any immediate job security concerns. And like
you have a lot of gall to bring up injury issues with Jaden Daniels and then your guy Kyler Murray.
Kyler Murray got hurt one time.
Jaden Daniels.
What's that?
I don't think the word even came out of my mouth. I think you were proactively concerned about an injury-based rebuttal.
You might have.
That you thought that I mentioned injury issues, and I literally did it.
Well, I mean, it's a fair point. If you're not going to say it, I'll say it. Yeah, he's built like you, Jacob. So.
And I also think
my point was not that he's going to get hurt. My point was that I don't think they're going to do designed rushing for him at the goal line.
Right. Okay, that's fair.
And then we also have to remember, like Jacob kind of touched on, just because you can be a runner doesn't mean you run the same in the NFL, if that makes sense. So Anthony Richardson, even though we got a small sample size, everyone expected him to have the big, long Lamar Jackson, esque runs, and he's really a goal line threat more to the tune of Jalen Hurts is than he was the long run Lamar Jackson. Now he did get hurt a lot, and it does work within the offense, but he needs to not only land with a team that uses him that way, and gives him the freedom to do it that way as well. This is why, for me, situation is going to matter. Granted, he doesn't have, the ghost of I'm convinced Daniels is going to New England based on everything that I've read, but he doesn't have Joe Judge calling the offense at least. So I mean, there's hope there. But
last I checked, the market is literally plus 100, plus 110, plus 300 on the Washington pick. So
okay.
Daniels is the favorite, but May is like on market implied odds. It's like a 50-45, or I guess more like 45-40-15 or something like that.
Okay.
I felt like May made the most sense after that Sam Howell trade because they're good buddies. So you just get him out of there so it's not awkward. But Schefter said 2 days ago that
Ryan Howell sucked.
His sources were telling him that Washington liked Jaden Daniels. So
we'll see. I mean,
I think we're just thinking too deeply into this. It's like a guy who most scramble yards in PFF college history, slightly ahead of Lamar Jackson, top 3 draft capital.
Yeah,
I really have an issue with Daniels as the QB too.
I mean, Caleb Williams too. Again, the uncertainty.
That's insane. That's insane. No, we're not. You've been Brett Pilled.
I've been Brett. Yeah, but it's if I had that pick, I would trade down.
That's fine.
I would prefer to trade.
Well, that's the thing. If you are sitting at the 1-1, yeah, it's a debating Daniels or Caleb as to who you pick. It's ultimately a meaningless discussion. The point is, if you trade down, I think that is fine. And I think when I look at rookie drafts, and I have a big piece that I'm going to finish up this weekend as the pre-guide. The way I try to look at it is less rankings, and it's more first I just look, I'm who do I actually want to draft? Who are the guys I really care about, and who don't I really care about? And then I look at prices, and it's okay, who are the guys that I actually like at the price that I think are like ideally inefficiently low, or at the very least efficient. And how do I position my draft capital around to just get to the spots I need to be to draft my players, basically. And I suspect that Caleb will ultimately be like an indifferent price for me. Like I'll be like, I'll rank him 1, and if I end up at 1, I'll take him. But like I don't think I'll be like moving up to 1. I've actually already moved 3 of my 101s. I moved like 1 plus a first for Allen. I moved like 1 basically straight up for Jefferson. I moved 1 and like a little bit for Chase. And ultimately, like I'm probably most interested in coming away with Harrison and Neighbors the most in this class. Part of that's a play style thing where I already like have pretty solidified quarterback rooms in most of my leagues, but those are probably the guys that I'm most interested in targeting. And really, I don't see a massive difference between them. So like probably the area where I want to be picking at the most is like the 103, or I want to then just be living in like Bauer's world, the 106 and the 107 probably.
Yeah, I think
to me after 108, like if you find value in drafting a quarterback, it gets really gross after that. But like I love Bowers, love the big 3 wide receivers. There's value with all the top 4 quarterbacks just based on projected draft capital alone, or a blend of rushing upside and potential landing spots. And then I think 2 to 3 of these running backs, like even if their profile isn't great, could absolutely smash just because the need is so high. Dallas takes Trey Benson, Chargers take Blake Corum, Giants take Jonathan Brooks. Like, okay, wow, those guys just skyrocketed.
Benson's the one that interests me the most, and I don't even know that I think that he's good. I think he like actually might be bad, but he has like enough pizzazz and juice and fantasy friendly goodness that he's the one where we could have a game changing decision based on kind of just like what a team decides to do, right? Like, like Travis Etienne is a guy who like, and I honestly like I still will disagree with a lot of the film people that think he sucks, but like that's a guy where like a lot of people like thought he sucked. And a lot of people would tell you that they've still been correct, but like it doesn't really matter because the Jaguars selected him and they've given him the ball a whole bunch since. And Trey Benson, it's like I'm kind of optimistic about him improving in some key areas, and it also might just not matter. Like in the Dallas Cowboys aside, right? Round 2, Trey, come on down to Texas, and we're gonna give you the ball 250 times. Like, yeah, the dude is extremely fast and breaks a lot of tackles. And if he runs into his center too many times, but the team doesn't care, then like we don't care at all as fantasy managers. So then like he's going to be great for fantasy, right? If he goes in like the 3rd round, it gets sketchy because I'm not really like a talent truther on him, but I'm definitely a truther that his fantasy upside is really, really high if a team just decides that they're going to manifest him being a fantasy back, which, there's spots where that's available to us.
Did you watch all of his tape?
I mean, by all as in every game he's played, God no. But have I watched a lot of his tape? Yeah.
So one question I have is, according to PFF, he's the greatest tackle breaking running back in their history, which is since 2014. According to SIS, he was like well below average at breaking tackles. And so like maybe it's just SIS isn't good, which I think is likely. But it also could just be like a difference in charting where, PFF is very strict in that you have to get your hands on the running back, which leans towards, heavier, bigger running backs getting an advantage. If SAS is more lenient to that end, I don't know. It just like didn't really make sense to me, but you said you really like him, but then you said you also think he might stink, which just feeds into that.
Well, okay. So what I like about him is like in a class in which I think there's a lot of guys who don't have a lot of fantasy upside, he's the exception to that, right? So like you look at a guy like a Blake Corum, and I have more confidence that he is like good in the sense of technically proficient. Like I trust Blake Corum to read the play correctly, to go to the right hole, to make the right decisions, all that jazz. I don't trust his pass catching. I don't trust his speed. I don't trust his like athletic ability to, be more than a reliable back. And, that means we're kind of probably living in like a Devin Singletary like fantasy world, which is ultimately probably replaceable. Benson has issues. Like, I think he has like massive vision problems. And, you know, that could mean that an NFL team chooses not to play him. But what I love about him is he's like insane in the open field, in that he can create home run plays, not just on speed, but by eating up angles from defenders. I think he continues his pace really, really soundly in the open field, where there's like guys trying to take angles on him. He doesn't stutter and try to break the one guy. He just keeps running, and he has these like S-curving runs that break into big, long touchdowns. And when you add that on top of the raw athletic gifts, that's a really interesting fantasy profile. Fun thing about Trey Benson's tackle breaking, I don't know if this is like a typo or if it was just like the greatest game of all time. And I haven't watched it because I normally try to watch the games against good competition. Trey Benson broke 18 tackles in a game, apparently against Duquesne. And like, if you literally just eliminate that game, his career missed tackle force percentage dipped 5 percentage points, and he goes to the 88th percentile, which is still good, but it's no longer like the greatest tackle breaker of all time.
Wow.
I was not aware that Duquesne had a football team. Like, to me, they're just like a member of the Atlantic 10 who occasionally like beats my March Madness bracket. But apparently they have a football team, and apparently Trey Benson broke 18 tackles against them. It's on my to-do list to like go back, because before I came across this Duquesne stat, courtesy of Mike Zoltan, I was like already wrapped my Benson film watching. So I made it on my to-do list to watch this Duquesne game to see whether like someone like fell asleep on their keyboard and just typed 18 by accident, or whether he had the single greatest running back performance in history against the Duquesne fake football team. But I'm excited either way. It's just an interesting note. I do think he's like a pretty good tackle breaker-ish. I think he's like not actually that strong. I think it's more so that he has really fast and he beats angles. And so people are like grabbing at his shoulder pad as he shrugs them off. I don't know that it's like, I would say he's like a super powerful back.
Yeah, that's what he feels like, a Raven to me. I know we said it when in the Noah Hills episode, but he feels like a round 3 Baltimore Raven to me. Just in his running style and his ability, that's just what he feels like to me.
The only thing that scares me about him is the fact that his efficiency definitely regressed going from his sophomore to his junior season. And I don't really know why. Like, I don't know what happened with how he was being used at Florida State. Like, the film still looks good, but it is like from otherworldly sophomore season down to, yeah, it's good, but it's not fantastic. And so that's a little bit of a concern. All of his advanced metrics back up that he's a very athletic running back, though. And that's good to see. But there are also some other running backs who fit like similar to his profile in this class that I'm going to be picking up a lot of on the back end, especially if Trey Benson starts going at the 109. Like, if he gets the draft capital and he's up there at right after the first 8 that are pretty much locked in that they're going to first 8, it's going to push me off of him a little bit. I'm going to start getting the people who look really similar, like the Jalen Brights, like the Marshawn Lloyds.
Lloyd is an interesting one where like his analytical profile is a bit of a mess, but I also can see it because we get the size speed combo. Wright is one for me where like I was really interested early in best ball because he was almost free. I think he has some really good talent. I think he's a little bit more limited, like power wise than Benson, where like he is like, I think, impressively powerful in the open field. I think he has like next to no power at the line of scrimmage. And I just think like Wright, different archetype than Corum, but I feel similarly from a fantasy perspective where I kind of feel like I know what he is. And I kind of feel like that's like a guy who gets 12 touches a game and has 0.82 rush yards over expected. And everybody on Twitter is like, why doesn't he get the ball more? Like that, that to me is like kind of just like what Jalen Wright's life is going to be. And maybe, you know, again, if he gets higher draft capital, then that potentially changes what his life is. But that's what he screams to me, which makes it a situation of like, you know, great best ball pick where there's value in getting like stringing together these like 10-point weeks on occasion. There's spike play upside with him. It's a tougher click in a dynasty rookie draft format where I'm just like Brooks, I think, has a ceiling. Benson, I think, has a ceiling. And I think other guys might have ceilings over stretches of time. I struggle to see like a sustained multi-year ceiling with the rest of these guys in the class.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. And
Go
a
ahead.
interesting note, I did a study last year, taking account the last 5 draft classes about what rookies maintain value going forward. And with running backs, I don't know if we'll see it this year, but if you're drafted in the top 2 rounds, that's whenever you can pretty much do no wrong throughout your first season and get to maintain your draft capital, get to maintain your trade capital. But the 3rd round running backs, you have to actually do something. And it looks like there's going to be a lot of probably 3rd round running backs, or at least all the running backs that we really want to see go to landing spots that we care about. So many of them are probably going to wind up to be in the 3rd round. And I don't know if that's going to tell us as much as we're wanting it to tell us. I think we're going to have to temper expectations a little bit and really draft based off of what we view their profile as instead of their landing spot if they're landing in that 3rd round draft capital.
I think also this year there's quite a few mid NFL running backs that ended up being fantasy relevant. That's gonna lead to some people chasing the dragon. If you would, you're gonna get some Devin Singletary-esque profiles being drafted in backup spots that is gonna have people holding on. We're already seeing the chase, the Kyron Williams, small, unathletic, but he could do it, completely ignoring what series of events needed to happen for him to be that successful. So I think that I believe it was old Bucky Boy that I said people are going to end up chasing that. Well, if Kyron Williams can do it, he's a dog. He can play. He's just got to get that situation. The chance of you finding like a 1 in 7 situation where these guys get to be bell cows in the NFL, even with how bad in air quotations the running back landscape is, it's unlikely. So you're chasing a little bit, but there's like we talked about, there's always one running back that creeps in. And like you said, it's going to be whoever Dallas takes. It's going to be whoever the Chargers take, maybe someone that Arizona takes. And I can't remember which one of you mentioned it, but the Giants. And outside of that, it's like, oh, I hope somebody gets hurt. Because if that guy gets hurt or someone gets cut, this guy's really going to finally have a chance.
The Giants is a curse, man. Devin Singletary, like, you don't want to be paired with that guy. Devin Singletary will take your job. And I'm the last thing for Devin Singletary truther, but like, if any running back who gets paired with Devin Singletary, like, doesn't go well for them.
Yeah, I argue with this a lot with my co-host Andy Buckler from the Market Report on the Dynasty Points podcast feed. And he says the same thing. He's just like, no matter how much you want to avoid Devin Singletary, he's a cockroach. You can want to kill him as much as you want, but he's going to survive the NFL nuclear blast, and he's still going to be there to interfere with your favorite running back. So I think you're right. I think you're cursed.
Do you like Brooks, Scott? Like, because I think I think my hot take on Brooks, I think he's a good prospect, but I think that his standing in the dynasty community has been benefited by him tearing his ACL because nobody looks at any other issue in his profile. And so I think he's like gotten this like fallen hero status where it's like Brooks would be like the dude, except he tore his ACL. And I think he's a good prospect. I don't think he's untouchable.
Well, like the key red flag beyond that is just that like we don't really have a sample to work with. So what are you left with? You're left with like a 10-game sample where he was like he showed the most pass catching upside of any like seriously like relevant running back in this class, and like was only slightly less productive and slightly less efficient than Bijan Robinson. So yeah, like he looks fucking awesome. The issue is just like, again, this class kind of sucks. So like, I don't know. I have him as RB1 just based on the fact that, I don't know, he was 90% Bijan Robinson last year. And, you know, maybe he could do that again, and he'll at least catch more passes than Corum or Benson and all the other guys.
I think this kind of just shows one of the like real strengths of this class is the fact that you can talk yourself into so many of these prospects, especially like the deeper you go, like the late second to really middle of the 4th. I don't know if we can really rely just on ADP to start to project where we want to be drafting our guys. It's going to be, if you have a pick anywhere in there, you don't care about what their ADP says on DLF or on Dynasty Data Lab. You're going to go in, pick the guy that you want, and you're you need to live with that, because you can talk yourself into so many of them, especially without knowing what their landing spot is. And I think it's going to get even messier whenever we start to incorporate landing spots. And there's these prospects that we would probably be taking in the 4th round because we don't really like their analytical profile, or we think that their film grades really suck, but their analytics look good. And then that's just going to throw in the mess. There's so few prospects in this class that we can look at and say, yes, your analytics are good. Yes, I like your film. You're going to be on my team. And it's a blessing and a curse for it.
All,
it should be
all in the top 8. They're just all in the top 8.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah. I like Brooks. Like, I think he's the most complete back. Like, I don't have any like glaring weakness with Brooks that I would with some of the other guys. I just don't think he like really pops for me anywhere either. Like, I think he has like base competence as a runner. I always like appreciate his kind of gliding style. It's just like an aesthetically pleasing running style for me. It's like an Aaron Jones, Tony Pollard truther. Like, he just looks visually similar to those guys to me when I watch him. I think he's a perfectly cromulent pass catcher. I don't think he's like a dynamic or electric pass catcher. Like, I suspect it's going to be a diet of swing passes and screen passes, but I don't think he needs to be taken off the field on 3rd down. So that's fine. Like, he can play in the 2-minute drill and stuff like that. I have like concerns about his short yardage rushing. I think he runs upright and a little weak in goal line situations, but that ultimately is it's a caution flag for me. And it kind of depends again on like, will a team care about that, or will they power through? And that ultimately becomes a draft capital question more often than not.
See, for me, he's, oh, sorry. I'm just, my last thoughts on this before we can close it out, hit Bowers and get you out of here is that I think he's getting the dream scenario situation. And as much as we like to go death by over analysis, when it's like, oh, he lands in Dallas, that's going to be my RB1, or he goes to the Chargers, that's my RB1, then I'm probably going to fade that player. Like, he's probably going to be overdrafted if he's going to get the nut spot.
The way this class is, where it's like 8 guys, and then I don't know, like, why wouldn't I take the round 2 running back of the Dallas Cowboys 109? Like, that seems better than taking like Brian Thomas.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I got to rethink that. I've been sitting there going, if you're a player that needs the nut spot,
today, I feel bad for Brian Thomas.
I'm just thinking, if you need the nut spot to be relevant, are you actually that good and are able to hold your job? I don't know. That's my outlook of it, but we can hit that next week when we have another absolute RB stud analyst in Graham Barfield on Let's Talk Bowers. Because Scott, you do have.
I just wanted to say to put a ribbon on it. My comps were for Jonathan Brooks, Miles Sanders, maybe a little more upside than we've seen from Sanders through this point. And then
I think Benson is more Sandersy.
I've heard that for Benson, like I'm just talking the analytics profile for Benson. It was Javonte Williams, but that would be nice. Or
and I see some of that.
Yeah. Or which, by the way, like, who is he? It's kind of hard to tell with that like devastating knee injury. But like the class as a whole, I would say is the 2022 class, except Jonathan Brooks is like a way lesser Breece Hall, who, by the way, is like easy RB1 in Dynasty. And Benson's a lesser Kenneth Walker. Actually, they're like athletic clones that perfectly sized.
I was going to bring up Walker.
And like, that's it. And then, not much else beyond that. Maybe one guy hits, but really just a bunch of good RB2s, no premier workhorses or bell cows beyond.
Benson range for me is like Walker, ETN is like the optimistic comps. Sanders being like kind of like maybe like a median comp. And then like low end comps would be like Rojo before he got thick, Jerome Ford.
I know this is crazy. I said there's like a chance he's on the Nick Chubb spectrum just because freak athlete, best tackle breaker in PFF history, easily led the class in explosive run rate, easily led the class in yards per carry when first contact was initiated at or before the line of scrimmage, and when contact was initiated after the line of, and so it's like, theoretically, like just on the numbers, you could see like he could be like the best of all possible worlds but like I know that's not the case. And like the guy,
I like Benson. He's my RB1 in the class. Nick Chubb, watching Nick
know.
Chubb is to watch.
I mean, he was drafted as the
Beethoven conduct his
RB4.
own symphony.
He was drafted late though. He was drafted RB4 round 2, right? His year.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe he was awesome in college.
Nick Chubb is just so sound. Like he just like never makes bad choices. Like he's just always doing the right thing.
He's the best pure runner in decade.
I was waiting for the Twitter meme to come through on this program that Nick Chubb is the best pure runner.
I refuse to use the word pure runner and Nick Chubb in the same sentence, just like avoid the meme, but it doesn't make it any less correct.
Well, Scott has been named by our own Jake Tribby as the walking meme, so it fits
also,
that Scott would drop this.
My lack of beard in the chat.
You
referred instead of saying where does Jakopb live? How is their son outside? I was referred to as the guy with no facial hair, which is just like a tough scene for me, given my name is right below me. Like I'm not saying you should know who you am. I'm just saying like my name is literally on the screen.
I think it's prejudice. We've got bald with beard in the profile picture of LaMarcus Peppermint, which A++ name on YouTube. Hopefully you're subscribing, but I think it's beard prejudice.
I live in Vancouver. That's why there's sun outside.
Oh my God. Elite trolling. All right, let's hit Bowers before we get out of here. Scott, I remember you and I spoke before you really started diving in because you were busy writing your other 250,000 word article, one of your 9 that you release every year.
Today.
Right. And I thought you had mentioned that you were concerned that maybe he's just a screen merchant. So where did you end up landing on this overall?
So when I tweeted or I messaged you about it, I had run the numbers wrong. Where like when I ran the numbers that time, like without screens, like his yak and his missed tackles forced like just plummeted. He was like 7th in the class. I'm like, ugh, this guy's a screen. And then I ran those again, and those were just like totally wrong. Like he's still like, the GOAT. He's like honestly even better. Like he leads. I think he's best ever, or at least he's best in the class, including wide receivers and yards per target without screens. He's just the fucking man. Like easily no worse than the second best tight end prospect in at least a decade. Analytically speaking, Jakopb, you read the dank stats section, just like everyone's an absolute banger.
The only thing I disagree with is that he's the second best tight end. I think he's clearly the best.
Really? Over Kyle Pitts?
And I'm not like trying to do like a revisionist thing. Like I think that I still like I'm a big believer in Kyle Pitts' future. What I like more about Bowers is that he does tight end things better than Pitts. Like the fear with Pitts that I like, the darkest timeline with Pitts, other than having Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder as quarterbacks and Arthur Smith as his coach, is like he is not good enough at the tight end things to be a tight end, and he's not good enough at the receiver things to be a receiver, and he ends up just like kind of floating in no man's land, and that's kind of what's happened.
Like Mike Gesicki?
Like being like a way better Mike Gesicki. But that's like somewhat the fear. With Bowers, like he can actually block, so he can play in line. He is like a more technically sound route runner. Like Pitts is kind of more of like a glider. And the problem with that is like that really works if you're matched up against linebackers. But then when they line him up outside, then he just gets matched up against corners. And then he's just like not actually an athletic freak for playing wide receiver. I think a lot of that's on the coaching. Like I think it's on the coaching staff to just not be brain dead and, use Kyle Pitts correctly based on what his strengths are instead of what his strengths aren't. But I don't think Bowers needs to be game planned around that way. I think that they can just be like, go play tight end, and then he'll just kill it as a tight end. Or they can hand it to him on freaking jet sweeps, and he can just like run for 50-yard touchdowns too, because apparently that works. I don't know. I think he's pretty unreal, and I think that we are grateful for Kyle Pitts thus far failing to live up to expectations, because when Pitts came out, he was going interchangeably with like Chase and with Lanston Fields a little less so, but to a point ahead of Najee Harris, clearly ahead of like Zach Wilson. And Bowers doesn't get like, there's no one having the should we take Brock Bowers ahead of Malik Neighbors conversation. There's no one having the there's barely anyone having the should we take Brock Bowers ahead of Drake May or Jaden Daniels conversation. There's more people I think we'll draft Roma Dunze and JJ McCarthy ahead of Brock Bowers. Then we'll draft Bowers ahead of anybody else. And so I think we're getting kind of a treat to get access to this potentially game-changing talent because people are a little bit shy after like we all suffer from Kyle Pitts' dramatic stress disorder. And I get it because like I was the one banging on the drum to draft Kyle Pitts, and I still am. And I just like don't really want to like subject myself to just like being owned online by saying all the same things about Brock Bowers. It's easier to like just do it in private, which I will. But like I feel like all the people who did the Pitts drum bang are just like kind of sitting here like feeling like we can't do the same thing for Bowers or people will get mad at us, and that's why he's not going as high.
So your knock on him is what you have as a perk. He's more of a traditional tight end. Was like sort of a knock, at least how I wrote it in the article, where Kyle Pitts, at least the dream with him was like he's Calvin Johnson at the tight end position.
Yeah.
And then I compared Bowers to George Kittle, but I use it as a sort of pejorative. Yeah. I think that matters when you're talking about like the highest end of the spectrum. You're contrasting George Kittle to Travis Kelce, just like the massive route advantage. And I know most of that's just being on a run heavy team versus a hyper pass heavy team, but like just running routes all day, being a featured option as the number 1 or number 2 receiver. I'm not giving up on Pitts, but like I'm so going back to that. Well, like same. I will get so much shit if I'm wrong, and I just like don't give a fuck. You write off the last year and a half entirely due to injuries. The injury was way worse than the team ever let on. He was impacted by it the entire year. He had trash quarterbacks. He had an incompetent coach. Now, hopefully, he has a great quarterback in Kirk Cousins. So I'm bullish on that. But yeah, I mean, no worse than second best. If you tell me he's the best, like I'm not going to fight you. He is a wide receiver as a route runner. He's a running back with the ball in his hands. He's Sam Laporta sized. People bring up the hype, but he's exactly Sam Laporta size. He's just fucking awesome. Like the stats you could pull from him are insane. Like we were talking about how this wide receiver class is bad with the age adjusted stuff. Like he legitimately has no worse than the 3rd best age adjusted profile of any wide receiver in this class. One of the best ever. I love him.
Okay. I want to maybe clarify / push back on this like traditional tight end thing. First of all, George Kittle is like in a league of his own in terms of how good of a blocker he is while also being a good receiving tight end. Like he's like a Mercedes Lewis, Chris Manhertz level blocking tight end who could be getting some like goofy 3-year, $21 million deal that we all dunk on if he didn't have the ability to catch a pass. And he's also one of the best pass catching tight ends. I don't think Bowers is like anywhere near the caliber of blocker that Kittle is, but I think that it still helps. I think he's like the perfect level of blocker that we want in fantasy football, which is not such a good blocker that they're going to ask him to pass block, but a good enough blocker that a coach doesn't feel like they're telling the defense it's a pass play when they line him up in line. Like if you can't run block as a tight end, you have problems because you won't get to play in certain sets. You won't get to play on goal. Like you can't line up a tight end who doesn't block as the inline tight end for a play action pass from the 1-yard line because the defense sees Kyle Pitts in that spot and they say, we don't believe you. We don't think you're handing this ball off because you wouldn't put this guy out there. So like you have to be able to keep a defense honest, and it allows you to have better red zone usage. And I also think beyond the blocking aspect of it, I think Bowers has like better skills for running like traditional tight end routes in the sense like I just think he's crisper and a little bit more agile, because he's not such like a long kind of galloping athlete that like I'll take Pitts over Bowers on running like some of the plays Pitts makes are ridiculous. Remember that preseason 50-yard go route where you just glided past a dude and caught it, and then his ADP went up around, and I was like, fine with me, I'll still draft him. And then got ruined. Like Bowers is more like he'll run slot receiver type routes. Like he'll run the whip route and he'll run these drag routes and kind of the stuff that Kelce does. And then he has a more natural feel for space and all of that, where that's just good to me. But then on top of that, he adds that juice, that we've seen through running end arounds and stuff on an offense full of 5 stars that hopefully separates him even from the Laportas and the I've been on record, like Brock Bowers is my tight end 1 in Dynasty. And I recently did an update of the tiers. I don't have any other tight end in this tier. So that's where I'm at with Brock Bowers.
I think we took him as, no, maybe not the tight end 1, but we took him over Pitts in our Dynasty draft we were doing. Yeah, I like Odunze a lot, but in a tight end premium, I think I'm taking Bowers slightly ahead of him, still have Neighbors and Marv ahead of him, just due to positional value. It's almost as though like fantasy, it's easy. Just fucking draft him. He's awesome. Like the real life debate is like almost more interesting to me, where you see him getting knocked for being a tight end, which like is warranted, except when you factor in the second contract, and then like he looks like this massive value. But yeah, we're talking about like Kittle from a fantasy perspective. Like Kittle from an NFL perspective is like such an insanely generous like Kittle's the most underrated non-quarterback in football, or like one of the most important non-quarterbacks in all of football. I said that about Gronk, where it was like who was the best non-quarterback of that era. It was easily Gronk, and like that was backed up by Vegas spreads. Like lines moved more for Gronk than any other player that wasn't a quarterback, and like equal to a lot of quarterbacks. The one thing for fantasy from like Gronk and Kittle, those were the guys where it's like their route shares were low, like their routes per game were low, but they were, putting up more than, what the Darren Wallers of the world ever did. Just because they were so insanely freakishly hyper efficient. And also like you're more efficient on inline routes as a rule. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe he's just the next, Gronk or maybe even Kittle plus. And he's just an absolute cheat code.
See, he's a cult. Not really for fantasy. That would be bad.
That would be if I could pick any landing spot, I think that makes the most sense to me.
I think I agree with longtime listener and day one OG. Toronto Dave says tight end 1 before stepping into the NFL is wild to me. I can't get on board with that. And normally, like I was Kyle Pitts was tight end 1, but he's now got legitimate young tight end competition to go against now at this point. Like you look at Sam Laporta.
I mean,
my
Kyle
Dynasty
Pitts is still 4 years younger than Sam Laporta, though.
Sure, but
I'm fucking with you.
We've got to do like the Jason Tatum. He's only 19 memes for Kyle.
But really, if Bowers comes into the NFL, we'd all be praying for him to land in a situation and have the type of season that Sam Laporta already shown that he could have. And the same thing with Trey McBride. Like we would be begging and pleading on our knees to the football gods to please just let him have this kind of target share.
I mean, I've given this take like on I think every second show this whole season, and I'll give it 8 more times. I really think Sam Laporta is like a priority sell. I just like, and it's not he's not good. It's not he's not good. I just like if there's one asset that I don't want to be invested in Dynasty, it's the asset that is like priced up for youth. That is primarily youth that's telling us about longevity rather than upside. And like maybe I'm just being too nitpicky. It's totally possible we run this back and it's like a freezing cold take. I just the way that he wins in the context of the offense that he's in and the people he's surrounded by, I don't know how much room there is to grow than what he was already put into right away. And it makes me like it's hard when I'm ranking because I think like he's so much safer than McBride, who we've seen like half a season sample of versus like a year and a half of not playing, or Pitts, whose production is mostly theoretical. Like it's hard for me to say like, oh, I really like these guys more straight up, but I really do like their ceilings more than I like Laporta's ceiling. And then Bowers, I just like more.
So what? When we're talking about a ceiling in for a tight end, it's like, okay, even if Sam Laporta is 80% for the rest of his career, 85% for the rest of his career from what he was in year 1, we're talking about a top 3 tight end every year in the league. But I mean, that again, we are most times, right, when we're talking about a tight end coming in as a rookie, we are on our knees begging, willing to do ungodly things
don't score that many
to whoever
points.
we have
Sam
to.
Laporta didn't actually score that many points. Like he scored like a really impressive. He has a really impressive season, but like I don't know. Like if I'm just investing in a tight end, like I want peak Travis Kelce, or I kind of don't want to bother.
So you got one guy. ever.
Yeah.
This is peak Travis Kelce.
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah, exactly.
I can't. I think if you've got an opportunity to have like a top 3 guy at a position that is scarce, I think that's just as valuable as praying to God that your guy that you're drafting with such high draft capital might maybe sort of hopefully get there one time if everything goes right. Like that's why I prefer Sam Laporta, and like I have McBride 2, Pitts 3, and then Bowers 4. But I'm sure if Brock Bowers comes in and shows that he can actually be Sam Laporta, yeah, then I can see an argument for number 1. But before we see it, I don't know. Because like you said, he goes to the Colts and we're forever just praying maybe one day he gets to be what we thought we were. And then we're once again at a shrine in a closet buried behind our suit jackets going, please give us 135 targets.
Mo Ali Cox vultures his 3rd touchdown off Brock Bowers. It'll be a great day on Twitter.
Imagine a year from now, we're like, sophomore breakout, Brock Bowers. I know I'm going to get shit for it, but it's,
we're just repeating.
McBride did it.
But if Brock Bowers, point, right? Like if Brock Bowers sucks, like whatever, I don't know. So then I'm just gonna stop. I'm just gonna stop giving takes on good tight ends. Like my track record on like dusty tight ends that have been passed over, who like rise like Jesus this past weekend is great. Like on Engrams and Njoku's and that stuff. That's where I'm gonna live. Like, and I'm just gonna stop ever giving takes on good tight ends if Bowers busts.
Right.
And I'm gonna stop giving takes on good tight ends. And I'm gonna stop taking good tight ends. Both of those things.
But that's where I just wanted to clarify the Bowers tight end 1 thing, right? Because TD mentioned it in the chat. I felt it's important to note that yeah, we can put him there, and if you're comfortable drafting him there, but you better be ready to be sitting there praying like we did for David Njoku, like you said, for 6 years to finally hit that athletic ceiling that we wanted, and it just took the greatest elite quarterback of all time, Joe Flacco, to get him there.
I don't actually have Bowers that far ahead at ADP. I have Laporta just like quite behind ADP. That's so like my take would be like if you find yourself halfway between Tom's take and my take, like if you agree with some of what I'm saying about Laporta's ceiling, and then you don't agree with, and you also agree with what Tom's saying about like the fear of Bowers, I would just trade Sam Laporta for Jalen Waddle, or trade Sam Laporta plus something for like I don't know, in Malik Neighbors. But anyway, Bo Callahan's in the chat. And, we gotta let you go, right, Scott?
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, I gotta run.
It's all good. There's no better way to finish the show than that we've done a good enough job that we've been invited to Bo Callahan's birthday. Don't think I don't know what you're doing. You're just trying to save.
We won't see Braylon Allen there because he didn't invite his teammates.
Right. He's just trying to save his draft stock at this point.
2/3 of my co-hosts understood that Bo Callahan went to Wisconsin, and Scott's already moved on to the rest of the game.
He's clearly not a draft day Vontae Mack, no matter what kind of guy, but that's okay.
That was one of the worst movies I ever watched. It was Dave.
I watch it every single year.
I can't wait to watch it this year.
Every year, the night before the NFL draft, I
ironically or do you enjoy it?
Both. Like I started ironically, and then I actually do enjoy it. But I also they'll be like, I'll get my like weed pen, and we're just like, but right around when they start like not actually having sex in the closet, but it looks like they might. I'm on a different planet, so like I'm really just enjoying it at that point. Like it's fun. It's like I'll usually have just finished up a big article. I'm ready to just see what happens, and I just want to watch Kevin Costner walk around in khakis and make like really low value trades, and then call someone a pancake eating motherfucker.
Bang his secretary.
Unbelievable. Look, every time you come on this program, whether we do gimmicks, whether we do eulogies, or if it's brass taxes, off the rails prospecting, it just gets better and better every time. And I know that you have multiple articles getting released. You're also doing a new podcast and YouTube series with Brett Whitefield, if you want to let people know what that is and what you guys having come down the line. I think it's a great program, and more people should be watching it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. This is my favorite show. Really glad to have it on the Fantasy Points Network. You guys are a bunch of geniuses, really entertaining show. Love you all so much. Let's do this again after the draft. How about that?
Of course.
Yes, I would love to actually have you and Brett on at the same time. I don't know how we're going to make that work, but Right, exactly. And of course, you have Thinking About Thinking with Jakopb. You can find that everywhere. You can find Jakopb at Jakopb Sanderson over on the Bird app. You have Lucas Gilbert.
I'm going to hold myself
Gilbert
accountable
FF.
right now. I know it's been slow. I've been really slammed with real life law work the last few weeks. I'm promising a very long, like if I was better at like diverting my time instead of having like 2 weeks without an article and then having like a 7,000 word article, I would have multiple articles, but I'm not. So you can have a really long article at the end of this video, I promise you. And you can just read it for as long as you want.
I was ready to go like 4 hours on this, but I've got a sick girlfriend. But like, I think this is worth it. Jakopb, you said something really poignant. I just want you to say it one more time with your chest out. Something about the Dynasty community overrating youth when it's primarily for longevity and not upside. Can you expand on that just a little bit before we head out? Because that was so smart.
Yeah, you can. I mean, everyone listening can feel free to disagree, and I think honestly, you can have like a good case for it in this application of this with Sam Laporta. I usually use this about quarterbacks, but youth has obvious appeal in two ways, and I think one of them is really valuable, one of them is not. Like, I'm in a dynasty draft right now that I'm running, and I'm weird. I like weird formats, and the way that we split up this format is that it's a 3-part draft. You do a derby, you do 3 different drafts to bid on your slots, and you end up getting a vet draft, a rookie draft, and a sophomore draft. We're doing the vet draft right now, and it's bleak, let me tell you, because there's anybody wants to draft. And the appeal for me of drafting all these young players is like, once you get past all the guys that we know have really, really ridiculous production upside, as Scott Barrett would tell you, upside wins championships. And so what am I doing, with like a Chris Godwin and his 14.8 fantasy points per game this year, who I think Tom and I drafted in your league, ironically. But like, it's really not worth that much. So at a certain point, like, you want to just take swings. And that's, to me, the appeal of the youth, is the appeal of the great unknown, where maybe there's something we're missing, right? Even if we don't think it's very likely. But then sometimes you'll see these profiles where we do more or less know what they are and what the range of outcomes is, but they're young, and so they carry a lot of value. And then what you see is they just don't really give you that much value over replacement, and they just slowly recede in value every year, very gradually, year over year. And that's the profile I just don't want on my team. Like, if I want stability in an asset, just give me a draft pick. And if I want upside in an asset, give me someone who has like a really wide range of outcomes, or give me a vet that has a really good chance of producing 20 points per game. But I do think like the most overrated asset in Dynasty is just like the perceived longevity of youth without the corresponding production upside.
Yeah, I really like that. That's really smart.
Yeah, and I feel like we did kind of just have that conversation with Laporta too. So we put it, not only did you say, but we put it into action. Look, the overhit on whether or not we were going to get through the first exit from this, but we're going to get through the second one. Look, Fantasy Points is growing at a rapid rate, and you're not going to want to miss it. We have Film vs. Analytics over there on YouTube. You're not going to miss that. Brett Whitefield, Scott Barrett. We have Paul Patterson writing Dynasty articles for us now. Shout out to him. The Dynasty community is growing in there. You're also going to want to be in the Discord for everything UFL. You're also going to want to go and check out Brett Whitefield's prospect guide. Do all of that right now. And while you're at it, hit subscribe. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose your best days. Well, goddamn, they're always spent tilting. Good night, everybody.